Everyone, Nunzio Sister with West Hollywood Youth Orchestra, part of Youth Training Orchestras of America, here with our basic music series, Intervals Part 2. In the last episode, we went over the unison, the fourth, the fifth, and the octave, our perfect intervals. Now we're going to go over our imperfect intervals. Before we go on, we're going to mention tonal gravity. And tonal gravity starts to come into play because we have what's called unstable and unresolved and stable and resolved sounds in music. Imagine putting two rocks on each other, and if they're both flat and balanced, they'll sit. If the rocks are unbalanced, you're going to expect one of them to fall one way or the other until the gravity is resolved. In tonal gravity, all the 7 natural notes are assigned a chord. So going A, B, C, D, E, F, G, for each level of the scale, we have a chord, and that's represented by one of these Roman numerals. All of these chords and notes function on tonal gravity, which brings everyone back to the original note called the tonic or the root. So when I start in A, I go away from A, and then I'm pulled back to A. And this is the general motion that makes music. If you're not working in tonality, then that's a different story, but for right now, we're going to be working in tonality. And because everything leads back to 1, we have unstable and unresolved intervals that like to move to the stable or resolved ones. Now, if you notice, the tonic chord is made up of all of the stable intervals at the same time. If I have a root, a third, a fifth, and an octave, I'm playing my 1 chord or my tonic chord, and that is the most stable, the most resolved combination of intervals in any key. That's home. Everything else is wanting to come back to that stable, resolved position. As far as our notes, whenever you have a B, whether it's a B or a B flat, that's called a second, and the general tendency is for a second to resolve down into a root. When you have a fourth, even our perfect fourth is technically unstable because it wants to resolve down into that third, whether it's a major or minor third. When you have a sixth, the general tendency is to resolve down into a fifth, whether that's a minor or major sixth. And in the seventh, the sharp 7 always goes up, and that is very important for key identity because having the sharp 7 identifies where the 1 chord is. And if you have a natural 7, that usually resolves down into a 6, but that's a special case, so I'm just going to mention it and leave that for there. So now we have our 7 natural notes, 12 chromatic notes, and if we keep the bottom note being played and compare each of the other notes ascending, we have all of our intervals. So I have an A, my next option is an A versus a B flat, then an A versus a B, then a C, C sharp, all the way up. Combining these different intervals, I can make chords, and all together, these sounds have a tonal gravity that want to move towards a stable position. Stable chords are made from 1, 3, 5, and 8. Unstable chords are generally made from 2, 4, 6, and 7 in a key, with the sharp 7 being important for key identification. As we mentioned in the last episode, all of our imperfect intervals have 2 versions. So after we go over this tonal gravity, we see that the 1 chord is super important. But let's take another look at this 1 chord. If we have a perfect fifth, so we have an A and we have an E, the perfect fifth doesn't change whether it's a minor or a major chord. So here I have a minor third, and here I have a major third. The imperfect intervals have the luxury of coming in 2 different flavors, while the E stays the same because it's perfect and set. This is a minor chord and will put you in a minor key. This is a major chord and will put you in a major key. All of the imperfect intervals, the second, the third, the sixth, and the seventh, come in a minor and major form. And basically, minor is the smaller of the 2, and major is the bigger of the 2, with the difference being a half step. All of our imperfect intervals come in these 2 flavors, unlike the perfect one. So if I want to have a sixth, I can have an F natural. That would be my minor sixth. Or I can have an F sharp, which is bigger by 1/2 step, and that would be the major. Great, so what we learned in intervals is whenever our brain hears two frequencies at the same time, it combines them into one. And so we hear it as one sound. So if I'm hearing one instrument play 440 vibrations per second and another instrument play 220 vibrations per second, my brain hears it as 2 to 1, and we call that an octave. When we have a standing note, in this case, I'm going to say 220, everything between the root, which is the first note, and an octave creates what we call an interval, and our basic intervals that we create music out of. So we have our natural notes, and then we also have our chromatic notes, which help fill in all of the steps. And intervals are comparing the bottom note to the top note and comparing the ratios from which they're played. So say we're gonna compare our E to our A. I know that our E is playing at 330 vibrations per second, while our A is playing at 2 because a perfect fifth is heard as a one package sound of a 3-to-2 ratio. We have 12 chromatic notes, and each of those chromatic notes creates an interval, and that is by comparing the frequency of the bottom note being played to the top. So if I have an A and I'm playing a C, that is called a third because it is 1, 2, 3 notes away, and my thirds have two flavors. If it's C natural over A, it's a minor third, and if it's C sharp over A, that's a major third. We have 7 classes of interval. We have our unison, our seconds, our thirds, our perfect fourths, our perfect fifths, our sixths, our seconds, and then when we reach the octave, the pattern repeats. So those are all the building blocks of music, and we're gonna start next week with counterpoint, which is bringing everything together, our clefs, our time signatures, our rhythms, and now our intervals to write lines of music, and it's exploiting these unstable and unresolved tendencies of the notes to move towards a stable and resolved place, specifically the tonic chord, that gives music its motion. Thanks for sticking with us on the Basic Music series, and keep practicing. We'll see you in the pit soon.